So, einen Vortrag haben wir noch.
We have one more presentation.
Okay. Fangen wir an. Diesmal darf ich den Tim ansagen.
Okay, let's get started. This time I'm going to announce Tim. The next speaker will be Tim. Tim has already given one talk, and now he will be talking about mothers and dads and siblings. Oh my goodness. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be interesting, and I don't want to take a lot of his time from him. And I'm just going to hand the mic over to him.
Dankeschön. What? Better? Okay, I can hear it. I can hear myself. Thank you again for Claudia for the invitation to be there and to talk to all of you. And I got the best slot of the whole program. I was thinking this morning as I heard Rob talk about Jan van Dijk, and then Gail talked about Jan van Dijk, that I should talk about Jan van Dijk. I didn't study with him, but I know him. We have met a number of occasions. He's a very nice man. So I just had to get my credentials out there that I do know Jan van Dijk. So I'm going to talk about mothers, fathers, and siblings, oh my. Coming from the Wizard of Oz, for those of you who haven't grown up with the Wizard of Oz. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Because there's so much to try to understand about families, and this is really a talk about families. And I begin it by bringing up the old Serenity Prayer, because I think this is what we need as families who have a child, any children whatsoever, but particularly a child with charge syndrome. So God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that comes from Reinhold Niebuhr. People don't know that because they think of it about AA, but Reinhold Niebuhr was a theologian in New York City after having left Germany, I believe, and a really good friend of my parents. So that's another, I just like to name drop here. In fact, their wedding reception was supposed to have been at the Niebuhr's house, but the Niebuhrs had a baby born that day, so my parents had to go elsewhere. I don't know where they went, but I wasn't invited. So we'll begin about talking about mothers, and you know why I chose the bear. You know, Mother Bear is well known for protecting her children. And if you're out in the woods and come across bear cubs, you stay away because Mother Bear is not too far. And knowing mothers of children with charge syndrome is the same thing. Do not mess with their children. Most of the research on parents of children with disabilities is about mothers, right? Because when you send a questionnaire out, who fills it out? It's the mothers, right? The fathers don't fill this stuff out. It goes right to the mother. Mothers are the ones that know anything. Quite a few years ago at the U.S. CHARGE-Konferenz, they had an opportunity for parents to get up and take a microphone and talk about their child with charge. And I sat through the thing. Only mothers spoke, not including myself. No father said anything whatsoever. It falls to the mothers. Often the burden of the caretaking falls on the mother most of all. You know, if both parents are working, you know, who's going to quit working if necessary to raise the child? It's likely to be the mother. There's some research that shows that the parental roles may be really well defined. You know, if we think in the modern family that mothers and fathers, they share everything equally, right? That may be true, but it's less true if there's a child with charge syndrome in the family, because you can't be an expert in all the things that have to be done. You can know a little bit about it, but, you know, for example, Nancy does the medical stuff because she knows how to take Jacob to the doctor, get the right answers and all that kind of stuff. But if she can't take him and I have to go take Jacob to the doctor, then I come home and she says, well, what did the doctor say about that? And I said, I'm not sure. Well, did you ask that question? I think I forgot to do that. So I'm not so terrific with that stuff. And she also, Nancy, did 90% of the educational things, training the speech pathologists and the occupational therapists and all those people on how to work with Jacob. Unless we had to go to the superintendent, and then it was me. On the other hand, I'm really, as I said the other day, pretty well regulated, so I do well with routine. And early on, Jacob had to be fed every 2 hours. So it was like, it's 2 hours. Nancy, did you feed Jacob? Oh, no. Could you do it? All right. 2 hours later, Nancy, did you feed Jacob? No. Could you do that? She's laughing because she remembers. So eventually I stopped asking. I just fed Jacob. So we kind of moved into this arrangement where I did most of his direct care in terms of his feeding and his bathing and his dressing, but Nancy was out there training the school team and doing all the doctor stuff. So it really worked out very, very nicely. And that's consistent with some of the research that there's just too much for everybody to do well in everything. You find what your strength is, right? Mothers may experience the most guilt about the whole issue. And we used to think, well, what do you do when you have a child with disabilities? You look at your wife and you say, what'd you do, right? Because obviously, if a child has charge syndrome, it's something the mother did, right? Actually, of course, we know now that it's not. It's actually, is Connie here? No, she doesn't like me to say this, but it's true. I mean, it's in the father's sperm. The mutation occurs in the father's sperm. We dads are responsible for the charge. I think that's hysterically funny. I really do, but because all those years you're wondering what she did. But some fathers are very bothered by that. But you can understand how women have suffered over the years with the guilt of feeling probably something that they did. And if we as fathers feel that guilt, that's just something that mothers have always experienced. So, despite what happened in our home, mothers tend to do most of the direct care, deal with the medical issues, deal with educational issues, the transition issues, what's going to happen when your child transitions into school, transitions out of school, transitions into whatever long-term living placement they're going to have, family management. And mothers have this need to protect, like the mother bear. So they're going to be very feisty. And they'll take care of you as if you're the dad, if you don't know how to behave. And mothers get me feel at fault. Here's an email from a mother that I received a number of years ago now. And she said, tonight, I'm so very tired of being the person figuring out what's going on. It's been a while since I felt so isolated, scared, on and on. Right now, it's as though nothing is enough to really help. I'm damn tired of this. I would like some help too. I need it now. My daughter needs it now. I think a lot of the mothers and many of the fathers have probably experienced this sense from time to time. That overwhelming sense of responsibility and helplessness in combination of what do I do? Turn my page here, see where I'm going. And I think that has led to some of the mistaken views about raising a child with severe disabilities. This was the view back in 1973. And this quote's from an article. The impact of a handicapped child on the family is never negligible, usually damaging, and sometimes catastrophic. A few families with great spiritual strength may be bound more firmly together by the experience, but in most, the stresses imposed far outweigh any benefit. That's depressing, but this is what they thought of us, because once in a while, one of us would speak up and say, this is hard, and say, oh, you're in bad shape, you're stressed. And of course, there are some negatives to this whole thing. I don't know enough to do this. Did you know enough? Did any of us know enough? And Nancy and I are in the field of disabilities. We're school psychologists, so I train people. Nancy worked with people with disabilities, but I didn't know how to do it myself. I figured, I'll help other people raise kids with disabilities, but no, not me, right? There's no support out there. And really, where do you turn? Claudia was sitting around saying there's no support anywhere, so she started this, right? Because there just isn't. This is kind of like it, right? Someone will need to stay home, and how do you figure that one out? And Nancy and I have had some very awkward discussions about these things. Well, I earn lots of money, therefore you should stay home, right? Which doesn't go over very well. Getting the right medical help, how do you find the right people? And in lots of the consultations and other conversations we've had, I know how hard that is for all of us to find out who do you go to if you need a particular kind of medical support. Fear for what could happen to my child, guilt that I'm not doing enough. You ever have that? Like, do you ever think, maybe if my child was being raised by somebody else, they'd do so much better? That's a really tough one. I remember I was in a kitchen in Christchurch, New Zealand. I was staying with a family, good friends, and I said to Robin, who is the mother, and I said, do you ever have moments, Robin, where you worry and feel guilty that maybe you're not doing enough and all the right things and someone else could do it better? And she said, oh my gosh, and she started off with this New Zealand accent, talking as fast as she possibly could. I realized that I'd said the right thing, but I don't know what she said in response, but I think she agreed with me. I may spend the rest of my life doing this, right? I remember being in around 60, more than 60 now, but Jacob was still at home, and we had to get a babysitter to go out if we ever wanted to go out, which we hardly ever did. Where my friends, same age, they're going off on trips and doing whatever they wanted to do, and they didn't have to worry about this stuff. It's a long haul here, and you never stop worrying about any of your children, but I think your child with charge is the hardest. There's not enough time in the day. When all the specialists tell you, just do this for 10 minutes 2 times a day, won't take much time at all. But every specialist tells you that until you realize that your day is completely booked with these specialist activities that you then ignore and then feel guilty about it later, but it's better to feel guilty than to have to do them. There's not enough time for spouse and other children. When do you ever see your other kids? Do I have any other kids? And then I just don't feel like I can cope. Well, more recently, and this is actually 2002, but we've been building on this since then, there's a different view of us families, we families. Families of children with disabilities report positive perceptions in addition to negative perceptions and stress. And there's some data to suggest that positive perceptions are common and that they assist the family in adapting to having a child with disabilities. It's not all gloom and doom. Sometimes, and it's not all the time, but there are moments when I think, Jacob's been the greatest blessing of my life. Because of Jacob, I get to come to Germany and talk to you all. Without Jacob, that wouldn't be happening. So I thank him frequently for making my career. But it's more than that. It's like everything I know about life and everything. It comes from what I've learned from Jacob. So, yeah, I have positive perceptions. And what's there to be positive about? The pleasure and satisfaction of providing care for someone who desperately needs it. That's kind of cool. The child can be a joy, especially when they learn to do something they never did before. You remember the time, if it's happened yet, that your child got up and walked. Jacob was 7, and when he walked out to school, teachers were crying and kids were cheering, and it's like, whoa, that's a real joy. Sense of accomplishment. Look what we've done. We've gotten this kid through the first 4 years of life, and he didn't die. The first 4 years are the toughest medically, and we did it. Strengthen the family. We spend so much more time, as a family, because we're so much more focused on family. It's a new sense of purpose. I know what I need to do in this life is to raise this child. New skills. My gosh, did you ever think you could stick a tube down a child's throat to feed him. I knew one man who took him 14 times to try before he got it down there, which is not a good thing at all. But, learned to do it. I become a better person. I think actually I was a pretty good person beforehand, but maybe I'm better. But I certainly learned stuff. Increased personal strength and confidence. You mothers out here, don't you sense that sometimes that you have dealt with things that your friends don't have a clue about? And take some pride in that sometimes, because you really should. You've done some amazing things that other people would falter, or certainly think they would falter. Social networks you've established here, for example, all the people that you know through these conferences, and even if you don't see them more than once a year, or maybe every other year, they're important people in your life. Some people have increased spirituality, because God has given me something I'm supposed to do. A different perspective in life altogether, making the most of every day. There are these positives. And, I'm not a half glass, either half full or half empty. I just know there's a glass there. But some days I'm pretty happy with what's in it, and some days I'm pretty depressed about it. But that's just life. I'm looking at Julie because she talked about that, yeah. All right, so let's talk about fathers. And I've done some research on fathers. It's ongoing, actually, and I'll tell you what I know about the experience of fathers, partly from being a father myself, but partly from what I've been able to get from other fathers. Fathers are often the forgotten parent. You've ever gone along with your spouse to something? Well, I saw it in the consultations, too. The father sits there and nods while the mother does all the talking. I'm here, too. Yeah, it's just the nature of the thing, and sometimes that's okay. But that's why there's so little research on the experience of fathers, because, again, mothers fill out the questionnaires. We know what mothers kind of experience, but very, very little about fathers. Researchers have generally ignored them completely. There is some research out there that said that when the fathers participate in child care, that led to higher marital satisfaction. That's a no-brainer, really. When the mother gets some help, she's a little kinder. I get that. But it's also a way to cope. You find the things that you can do and do them, and you feel like, now I'm coping with the situation because I'm participating. Fathers, has been said, may have an intense reaction to the diagnosis. I don't know that that's not true of mothers, too, but I think fathers sometimes feel like, your progeny is so important to you. We don't give birth to these things, but they carry on our legacy, and when something so terribly wrong is in charge, that may lead to this very intense reaction. Child raises questions of life's meaning. What's the purpose? I thought I was supposed to have these kids, and may feel cut off from social support. This is kind of important. Where do dads get social support? Where do men get social support? And men aren't so good at it. You ask a man who's been married for a bit, and they say, well, who are your friends? Well, my spouse. For men, their best friend is very frequently their spouse. Where for women, well, it's this person, this person, this person. We're there somewhere in the list. But that's okay, because women are much better at friendship in general than guys are. So I think when women are in trouble, when Nancy's upset, what does she do? She gets on the phone and calls her sisters. I'm there, but her sisters are going to do much better, and she can reach out and do this kind of stuff. For me, it's like, hey, Nancy, I need help, because there's not a lot of other people. And that's just kind of a guy thing. Some research suggests that fathers have a negative view of professionals. And I think, I'm going to say this again later, but that's a man thing. What do men do? Men are fixers, right? And most of the medical professionals are men, and so why aren't they fixing this, right? And I think there's that kind of expectation that if you're a man and you're a doctor, you should be fixing this stuff, and you're not doing it. Fathers can also acknowledge personal growth from this process. I've been doing fathers groups for many, many years. I didn't intend to do fathers groups, but we got to the second U.S. CHARGE-Konferenz, and I was asked by the people on the board, will you lead a fathers group? I said, all right. And then I just kind of got it. And I thought I'd given it away, and then last summer at the CHARGE-Konferenz, we were sitting at the opening presentation that morning, and Nancy was looking through the folder, and she said, Tim, it says here you're leading the fathers group. I said, oh, I had no idea. So it's kind of taken for granted a little bit. But my very first fathers group, oh my gosh, they wanted to talk about insurance, medical insurance in particular. They wanted to talk about golf. And I was trying to get to some feeling stuff, and it was really, really hard. I was getting a huge headache. Finally, I asked a question that got some response, and one father said, okay, before my child with charge was born, I had 2 sons. I never saw them because I was either working or I was drinking. And after my child with charge was born, I realized that wasn't going to work. So I sobered up, I stopped drinking, I stopped working all the time, and now I spend lots of time with all 3 of my children. Yeah, I thought that was so cool, because I think sometimes the reality of a situation hits us. We can't continue to live the life the way we've lived it. Where am I in my list? Yeah, okay. So acknowledging personal growth, that's where I was going with this thing. When I do the groups for the CHARGE-Konferenz in the U.S., we sit in we did sit in a circle. This last time was 2 circles, or too many guys. But the time before that, I had like 56 men in a big circle. When they start walking in, I say, oh, your wife sent you here, huh? And they all say, yes. But what I do is I ask them to go around the room, and each person says, who their child is, and I say, tell me the best thing that's happened to you because of having a child with charge syndrome. And it's really actually inspirational. And I think the dads leave the room at the end, because that's all we have time to do with 56 fathers, feeling better because they've thought about, yes, I am closer to my spouse than I was before. Yes, I do spend more time with my children. I've learned more about childcare. Yes, I've slowed down and I smell the roses. I mean, there's all sorts of really terrific stuff that comes out of that. So I think personal growth is really an important thing for everybody, but I think lots of dads with a child with charge really experience that. So why do we know so little about fathers? Fathers have traditionally delivered discipline and life lessons, right? Discipline. This is what life means, kids, and not the direct care. So you don't listen to them because they don't know that much. Assumed to have the same views, thoughts, concerns, and stress as mothers. They're just like the wives, right? Now, if you're a guy in here, you're thinking, I'm not much like my wife. She does it differently. But that's the mistaken view that's been promulgated, and therefore, we don't know a lot about fathers. So I had an undergraduate student who was really interested in fathers. So we did this. This was her honors project for her degree in psychology. And we surveyed, we got 93 fathers back, including 4 from Germany. Heiko. My data is ruined. Okay. What do I say? Who fills these things out? Claudia, if you have a questionnaire, send it to her. She'll fill it out for you. But that was a really good return. That was a really good return. 93 fathers is wonderful. And an interesting distribution. Most of them were married. The age range was pretty nicely distributed. Education was pretty nicely distributed. That stuff's less interesting than everything else, but it's there. So fathers' reactions, we asked them to list 3 words that describe their reaction to having a child with charge. And we try to organize these in terms of categories, but recognize that a father might have a term in all 3 different categories. So these are just kinds of the things. The largest one was scared, concerned, anxious, fearful, which is good reality testing, right? I mean, that really is reality, to be scared, concerned, anxious, fearful. We don't know what's going to happen. Sad, heartbroken, lost, pessimistic was the next largest. Then shocked, stunned, offended, confused. And so there was that next to the last one, love, pride, appreciation, dedication. So there's sometimes like you look at this helpless little baby that's probably got wires coming out of all parts of their body, including places you didn't know existed. And you say, but this is mine, and I'm going to really, really love this kid. We'd asked, do you know that the mutations, it comes from the father's sperm, and more than 2/3 did not know that. I know Connie's very shy about talking about it, but it's pretty well established at this point that that's where this comes from. Because, men reproduce sperm their entire lives. And have you ever taken a piece of paper and made a copy of it, and then taken the copy and made a copy of that, and then take a copy of that and made a copy of that? And by that time, it's got distortions in it. And that's what happens as men age. Their new sperm may have little mutations in them, many of which make no difference whatsoever. And we knew from long ago that the average age of fathers of charge was older by a bit than the typical average of fathers' age. So we knew they're a little bit older in general. Doesn't mean there aren't younger ones, but in general, fathers were older. I was certainly older. Okay, impact on career. What happens to your career when you have a child with charge? We asked them, has there been any change in how you use your leisure time? And that really, people said no real time and change in leisure time, which is kind of interesting. Only half of them took some of their allotted vacation, and half didn't take a lot of vacation. They're still working very hard. But career was significantly less central to their identity since the birth of their child with charge. How do we define ourselves as a person? Hello, I'm Tim. I'm a psychologist, right? We put our career right out there. But no, hi, I'm Tim. I'm the father of a child with charge syndrome. Things change, and so may our sense of identity and the importance of career as identity may have seemed to have changed. Interestingly, I think that the birth led to a career or job change for 29%. And not all of those were due to the child, though we did ask this, but the majority of them were. People moved from one city to another city. We knew a family moved from Michigan to Boston so that their child could have better services. So there were changes related to now we can't live here anymore and expect our child to grow up and do well. So, and some had to change because of medical insurance. United States, we don't have good medical insurance, even with what's been called Obamacare. It's still a problem insuring everybody and having enough money in that to do the kinds of things that our kids need. Most fathers felt that the job was father-friendly, which is kind of important because when the school calls up and says, your son just spread feces all over himself, someone needs to come and get him. You'd like to be able to go to your boss and say, by the way, I need to run away for a while and never come back. So overall, though, the importance of career, they said, hadn't changed, but the centrality to their identity is the thing that changed. Career is still important. They still want to work, but it's not as central. We asked them about the impact on friendships. And I talked about guys and friendships a moment ago. They said basically the quality of their friendships was lower since the birth of their child with charge. Just the quality isn't there, or as much there. And they have fewer friends since the birth of their child with charge. Who has time for friends? I mean, really. I think many of us normally don't have time for friends, but I tell you quite honestly, I live in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. My best friends are not in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Rob Last, David Brown. These are the people that I'm closest to. Jude Nicholas, those of you who are the Scandinavia, I mean, these are my closest friends. It's all related to my career now in charge syndrome. It's a difference. They were less satisfied with the number of friendships since the birth. I just don't have that many friends like I used to. But this is interesting. They didn't rate time with the guys as so terribly important anymore. You know, because where do you do time with the guys? You know, well, you sit out here and watch the game, which a lot of guys, there were not just guys last night doing that, but the game was on. And I wanted to go over and watch it, but I had to talk to my colleagues and friends. Not entirely, but we are a football family at home. In general, they did not want more friendships, nor did they miss those they had before, just in general. You know, I don't have as many, but I don't need it as much as I used to need it. It's not like friendships aren't important at all, but they're just not as central as they used to be. We use this scale called the DADS Active Disease Support Scale, or the DADS. It's a measure of, they have all this listing of different medical needs that a family might experience in terms of the things that parents have to do when they have a medically involved child. And the dads go through and they check out the things that they rate them, the things they think they do for the family, and then how helpful they think the things are that they do for the family. So this is the one which is the things I do the most of in terms of helping out the family. So the number one was to recognize and respond to the child's symptoms. It may be, honey, the child's not doing well, but it's still they're recognizing. Give up sleep if the child's condition needs it. Take care of the child so the spouse can go out. And Nancy was doing Taekwondo for quite a while. She became a third-degree black belt. So that meant, of course, I would say, yes, dear, whatever, dear. But she went to do her Taekwondo, and I stayed home. I was perfectly happy to do that. But someone needed to stay home, so that worked out. Come to the child's medical appointments, but come with someone else. Reward, praise the child for cooperating with treatment. And their overall scores, you can tally up a score here, with very similar to other disability groups that the instrument had been used with. That was interesting, that these are the things that dads seem to think that they, in general, do to help out. But then you ask them, what are the things that you do that actually you think are making a difference, that really are helping? The list is, I didn't turn the right page. The list is some overlap between the list. So, you know, the most helpful thing probably is taking care of the child so the spouse can go out. That seemed to be helpful. Take over household tasks, giving spouses more time to attend to medical issues. So, okay, you take them to the doctor, I'll get the dishes done, right? And that seemed to contribute well. Engage in leisure activities with the children, come to the child's medical appointments, recognize and respond to the child's symptoms. But the thing that really struck me is, in this case, when you scored, how helpful you think you've really been. Dads of children with charge were much, much lower than the other disability groups. And I've thought a lot about that, and I think I probably have in a later slide, but I want to say it right now. I think it's because charge is so complicated. Now imagine having a child with Down syndrome. Oh, if only, right? Not so complicated, right? Or we used to belong, I think we belonged for 1 year, to this support group of parents whose children were deaf. Oh, did they whine and complain and moan about their child being deaf? We thought, geez, if Jacob was just deaf, life would be a picnic. So yeah, I think it's much harder to feel like you're doing enough. You know, I'm trying to do these things, but does it really, really help? Is it really enough? I think dads sometimes feel bad about themselves because we're just not helping as much as the family really needs it, but I don't know what else to do. And that's the problem. We asked 3 questions that have been used in a national study so that I can compare our results to like 2,000, 3,000 other fathers. And the first one was, how happy are you taking all things together? Now, I have to say, the score wasn't, I'm really unhappy. It was just a little less happy, significantly less happy than the average scores. So I'm not at all saying that fathers of kids with charge aren't happy, but maybe a little bit less happy. Maybe a little bit more realistic when you think about it. All things considered, how satisfied are you with your life as a whole these days? And again, significantly less satisfied. Not terribly unsatisfied, but not as satisfied as the others. And then finally, how often, if at all, do you think about the meaning and purpose of life? Who has time for that, right? So we were significantly less often than others. I've just collected some new data of fathers who do not have a child with charge and don't have a child with disabilities. And I have a student right now back in Mount Pleasant who's analyzing the data, so I don't know. But I'll be very interested to see if they compare to this group compared to us. All right, so anyway, feeling a bit helpless? Fathers are fixers. Charge is hard to fix. You may not know best. You may not be father knows best, because how can you know best when something like charge? I think it's very frustrating for men. I'm supposed to know if the car breaks down. Now, I don't personally know what to do when the car breaks down, but take it to the shop. But I'm supposed to, right? We're fixers. But charge doesn't get fixed so easily. Charge is so complicated and involved, fathers may not feel they're able to contribute enough to be useful. The family may need more attention than it did before, but career is still important, just less central. Friends are nice, but also less central. Happiness and life satisfaction are impacted, but no time to worry about the meaning in life. So that's what I know about fathers at this point. Let's talk about siblings. And there's even less research really on siblings, I think, than on fathers. Who cares about the other children? Well, I think we do. We just have a hard time knowing what to do for them. It really is. I mean, you worry that your other kids feel like they're ignored because they're ignored, right? But what choice is there? On the other hand, I've always felt that my other children were really so responsive to Jacob. It was really wonderful. It's like that situation where, I could say to my kids, hey, I need a glass of water. Would you go get it for me? Dad, I'm busy. Get it yourself. They're very polite kids. But if I said, hey, Jacob needs a diaper. Could you run downstairs and get one? They do it right away. And if Jacob needed something, they were on the spot. If I needed something, no, not so much. But that's okay, because we all understood that Jacob's needs were really, really important to all of us and making sure that those were being addressed. So what do we know about siblings? I put this is what we knew, because I'm not sure the research was very good, and some of my own research differs from this, but they may be more empathic. They may have more feelings about other people, caring more about other people. There was some idea that they might be more likely to go into social services kinds of occupations, working with people. They may be sometimes embarrassed, and that one I've seen. Sisters give more caretaking than sisters and families without a kid with disabilities. But brothers also give more caretaking, which is kind of interesting. But then someone needs to help, right? We really need this help. Brothers are also more likely to be proud of and take care of a brother with disabilities, which is really kind of cool. Do you worry about that? I mean, I know that as a parent, I have not wanted to burden my children with Jacob. On the other hand, what happens? So my oldest son came forward about, 7, 8, 9 years ago and said, I want to be responsible for Jacob. I was like, oh my gosh. I wouldn't have asked, but he volunteered. And I think one of the other kids will be very much involved too. I think all will be to a certain extent. But we'll see. But that's a concern. Siblings may be reluctant to add to parent burdens. So I knew she was young when I first knew her, a girl with Charge from Boston and her sister. I actually met on an elevator at the Charge-Konferenz and got chatting. And so I knew that sister when she was kind of like junior high and high school and then college, and the sister. And then I was corresponding with the mother, and she said, oh, Chris is in a psychiatric ward. What? Because I thought she was the most stable, mature person in the world. And said, yeah, evidently she had all these problems and you never told us about them. And so I contacted Chris and I said, what's going on? I didn't want to burden my parents. They were so concerned about Patty. So that really worries me, that we may be missing what's going on with our kids, partly because we don't have the time, but partly because they don't want to tell us, because they know how stressed we are. I don't have a solution for that one, other than I think we all need to be kind of aware. But this isn't always easy on the siblings. They care deeply, I think. But they may be carrying their own burdens, and we need to know about that. Okay. So we did this study. These are my two, again, undergraduate students who worked on this study with me at different times. We had 29 siblings in this study, 14 males, 15 females, which is kind of cool. Ages from 13 to 42. So I had one or two really older ones, but most of them were not that old. The average was 20, 21. The average age of the sibling was 17, with a range of 3 to 29. That was the not interesting part. Okay, we use this scale called the Sibling Evaluation Scale. It's only ever been used in one other study, but I wanted something I could find. And I corresponded with the author of the scale, who was extremely unhelpful, but it's something I could use. And the largest impact on the siblings was one of feeling of feeling isolated from time to time. Because when you want to share what's going on in your life with your friends, they don't get it. I mean, I know you as parents, and we have siblings or two here too, but they don't get it, right? They don't really know what we're dealing with. The siblings have that same experience. So at those moments when you're feeling most discouraged, you may have a sense of isolation. They felt like they became more tolerant as human beings, which is, I think, really cool. I put up with much more. I tolerate differences in people. That's good. Became more responsible. They had to, didn't they? Because we need their help. So they had to kind of grow up and help with these things. Obtained accurate information. That was just a question, have you felt like you've obtained accurate information about your sibling with Charge syndrome, is how we worded it. And that was one of the ones that most of them agreed that this is something that they've done. Being concerned about siblings' future. And why would that be? Because it may fall on them, right? I mean, that wasn't said, but I think you can get that implication here, that's going to be a concern for them, because down the road, this may be the siblings that are in charge. I looked more at social isolation, and I gave a couple of scales. One was it's a loneliness scale, and it's one I've used many times because I used to do research on loneliness. And what was interesting is these kids, by their scores, were less lonely than college students that I had data on. Much less lonely. Now, that's because maybe they've got lots more contact within their family, or maybe they were lying to me, right? I mean, you don't know how to get the sibling, because the sibling doesn't want to appear to be unsympathetic and not on top of stuff. So it's really hard to know. But anyway, what they told me in this study was that they were not all that lonely in general. The next scale is about social support, and this asks you, how likely are you to use social support when you need it. We need other people. And here, they were similar to my college student population. They said, yeah, we use social support. Again, do they or don't they? It's hard to know, but at least they're saying that they do, which is good because I want them to use social support. So if they say they are, maybe they will. Just some interesting stuff. 12 had attended a charge conference. 7 had attended a support group, probably at a charge conference, but who knows. And 10 had friends with a sibling who has disabilities. That's about a third of them, but that's probably really, really helpful, isn't it? And probably the kind of friend you want because they have some idea of what you're going through and you can share a bit. So, I watch siblings at the U.S. Charge Conference more because there's so many more of them. But they've known each other for years and years and years. And they hang out together. It takes them about 15 minutes of awkwardness because they haven't seen each other for 2 years, although they're mostly on Facebook. But then they're off, and they hang around together, and they have a wonderful time. It's a really great social support for them. Next charge conference in the U.S., I'm going to have them do a panel on sibling experience. I think that could be very informative. Okay, that's social isolation, right? Okay, so you think you have this all set? Yep, I did. Good. Social isolation. Yes. So perceptions of family stress. Because I was concerned about how much they might want to protect their families from stress, I wanted to ask about family stress. So all but 2 of them, the 29, believed their parents experienced at least a moderate amount of stress. And the majority of them thought it was due to having a child with CHARGE syndrome. So they're aware of the stress. Most of them are aware of the stress, and the majority of them felt it was due to having a kid with CHARGE. 21 said, yeah, they tried to avoid adding to their parents' stress levels. And I had a measure of family hardiness. How hardy, how healthy is the family? And the average was quite a bit less hardy than what the normative group. So they're seeing problems in the family. The family is not entirely well, which isn't surprising and doesn't say anything about us not doing things well as parents. It just means that the kids are acknowledging the stress that we experience. This was interesting. We asked a little scale on what their own personal well-being was like, and they scored very, very, very high in their own personal well-being, which could be really exciting unless, again, they're not telling me the truth, and I don't really know. But at least they were, on this form, they perceive themselves as being pretty together. I did find that those with a higher sense of personal well-being were significantly less lonely and more likely to use social support. So maybe the fact that they have people around them, or at least they say they have people around them they can count on, leads to a greater sense of personal well-being. I didn't see differences by sex, by birth order, their age, or the age of the sibling. Those things didn't show any differences in any of the kinds of things we looked at. But choice of career. So I divided careers, and we asked them what's your long-range college major or career. We put those in categories of kind of social services and not social services, business, that kind of thing. I didn't find differences between those going into helping versus non-helping careers in any of the measures, except those going into helping careers indicated that their sibling influenced their choice of career. And that's kind of cool, So many of our kids, I think, actually are influenced by their sibling with CHARGE in terms of choice of career. But I think the idea that all these children grow up and go into social services is wrong. I don't think that's true at all. Generally, they indicated they highly valued their sibling with CHARGE. They recognized parent and family stress and tried not to add to it. They didn't confess to feeling particularly lonely or socially isolated, and they generally perceived themselves as doing well. So that's encouraging. I want to talk really briefly about family systems, and because I think you'll find one study that was done on this, not myself. Very, very interesting. So a guy named Olson put together this model, and this is the very simplified form. I'm going to show you the more complicated in a moment, but I don't want you to be panicked. So there's basically two dimensions that he looks at families on. One is cohesion. How cohesive is the family? How much time do you spend together? How much of a sense of identity do you have with your family group? And the other one is flexibility. How flexible is the family system so that it can move with changes that occur, right? We can remodel ourselves based on events that happen. I mean, think about having a child with charge and how many changes you might have had to make in the way your family functioned as a result of that. So those are the two basic dimensions. This is what the model looks like. See, I didn't want to show you this first because it's very colorful. I like that. But basically, they're breaking down the two dimensions of cohesion from an enmeshed family, which is a family that only spends time with each other and not with anybody else, right? Down to, at the other end, a disengaged family that never spends any time with each other whatsoever, right? They may live in the same house, but they may be there at different times, not speak to each other, and their interests are elsewhere. Those two extremes are not healthy. Most of us are somewhere in between, which is a connected family that feels like, yeah, my family is extremely important, we're well connected to one another, but I have other interests outside the family. A more separated family is also very healthy. It just means that, family is not necessarily my number one priority, but I'm close to my family, I care about my family members, we do spend time together. Those are both kind of healthy. The other dimension goes from one end is a chaotic family where there are no rules or no guidelines. There's no real common structure. So there's no way to really know to what extent the family is responding to social change because they're just never quite doing anything together. At the other end is a rigid family where all the rules are very strongly prescribed. This is the way we function as a family. We have dinner at 6 o'clock, right? And you will be there at 6 o'clock. And we make the decisions and you do what we say. That's a more rigid family. In between is they use the term flexible, where, we have rules, but they can change depending on circumstances. We have decision makers, but that may change too depending on circumstances. And then the more structured family where, we like to have dinner at 6, but sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. We have a good sense of what the rules and priorities are, but it's not rigidly enforced. It's just the kind of guidelines we try to follow. I don't want to spend... Oh, that clock is fast. Okay. Cool. I'm going to keep you here to the last minute because I can. Actually, I have no... You can all get up and walk out. There's nothing I can do about it. So I tell my students this. I come to teach my classes, I'm terrified because you may just decide all to walk out and leave, and there's nothing I can really do about it. Yeah, I can flunk you, but it's the only reason why they stay. So flexibility, adaptability is about these issues up here. Who's in charge? Right? In the more flexible family, that changes. In the more structured family, it's better defined. Okay, who can do what? What are the rules and the roles? In a more flexible family, that changes from circumstances. A more structured family is pretty well defined. This is what dad does. This is what mom does. This is what son number 1 does, right? These are kinds of the things that we do. Negotiation, how much negotiation is allowed? Mom, I'd like to change my role today. That's, in a more flexible family, that might be acknowledged and addressed, and maybe a role changes. In a more structured family, much less likely. Organization, how orderly are things? I said in my last talk, if you don't have an orderly household, start it now because your kid will benefit. But, but it doesn't have to be 100%, right? So more flexible family, less order, more structured family, more order. And then values. Do we agree on what's important? In a more flexible family, there's room for different values. Nancy said the other day that our youngest son's an atheist. I'm not, but he just announced that a number of years ago. That's fine. We're flexible about this. Do what works for you. And certainly I don't think forcing him to believe something is going to have any effect whatsoever. So, values, what's important. So if you were, let's pretend that you're a family that has a kid with charge syndrome. Which do you think would be most beneficial, to have a more flexible or a more structured family? More what? Both. Gee, some people can't just make up their minds. They have to say both. Well, let's think about the advantage of a flexible family is that you don't know when you wake up tomorrow what you're facing, right? And the rules you had yesterday might not apply today. So some degree of flexibility is probably pretty important. On the other hand, if there's no sense of order and no organization, our kids are going to flounder because, as I said, they need to have a predictable kind of life. So it turns out that Claudia's answer is the correct one. The research study found that both of those can be very important and very helpful. And I don't know how we make that happen, but yeah, there are times we have to be quite flexible, but there are times when having a sense of order is probably helpful as well. So, well done. So, bad. Chaotic and rigid, not good. I wish my students would get that because I covered this with one of my classes, and then I asked them on a little 2-point essay question to tell me the kind of family structure they'd like in the future. And some of them will write down rigid or enmeshed. And I said, no. I told you 5 times these were bad. Really, rigid, we need to be able to go with the flow. And there has to be some amount of order.
He said, we fit together because I'm chaotic and you're rigid.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that well. I've got hearing aids, but yes, well, I don't know why we're together, but good point, though, actually. All right, this is system cohesion. So, how close are we? How involved are we with each other as a family? How much backup is there, right? So, if Dad's in Australia at a charge conference, and Mom needs backup, how much backup is there within the family? Can she count on the kids, for example, to back her up? Where does that come from? Who benefits from decision making? What do we share as a group? And how is morale in the family? With a more connected family, there's much more involvement. There's much more backup. It's much clearer what the benefits are, who makes the decisions. There's much more shared with one another, and there's much more sense of, what's the thing for the, all for one and one for all kind of thing, With a more separated family, there may be a little bit less involvement. It's not all the time. My oldest 2 boys, one lives in Philadelphia, one lives in Boston. We live in Michigan, which is a long ways away from them. So I think of us as being separated, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because we're still close. It's just we're not seeing each other all the time. In terms of a separated versus connected families, connected family, we're there with each other much of the time. Separated family, we're with each other, we care about each other, we're just not always there. Which would you rather have for a family of a child with charge syndrome? And I'm not going to even look at Claudia. She'll get this one wrong anyway. Anybody hazard a guess? Well, the research showed that the more connected family seemed to help. There's so much to be done. Having people there that you can count on and use as backup, even though, my parents raised us in more of a separated family. You go out and make your own life someplace, and I think the connected here for raising a kid with charge, really, really helpful. All right, I'm skipping that again. In the end, it is about family. Sources of meaning. Where does the meaning come from in your life? And I think it's often our family. You know, I talk to so many of my students at Central Michigan University, and I say, well, where do you want to live when you grow up? I say, well, grow up, but they're not quite grown up. You're my family. We're very close. You know, family's so important, and it is a big place where one gets one's identity and meaning. Sense of belonging. Where do you belong the most? In our families, right? And that's what we're trying to develop for all of our children, is that sense of belonging to this unique group. Not all families have a family motto. We just figured out what our family motto was. It's, yay! Sorry, but it's true. We were asking the kids the other day, what do you think our family motto is? And one of them said, yay, because we say that a lot. You get a Christmas present, you open it up and go, yay! It's what we do. But some families, you know, I ask families this, and sometimes know immediately what their family motto is, and others look at you blankly. But I think when you have something, you say, yeah, that's kind of what we believe. It's a sense, again, of we're together facing this kind of thing. And maybe your family motto is, whatever the odds. That'd be kind of a cool one for a family with charge. If you take that one, give me credit. Family rituals. What do you do as a family? Nancy and I know. I didn't know how long that would take. I'm looking back in the booth. You know, we established pretty quickly rituals in our family because it was so terribly important. After dinner, we go for a walk as a family. You know, these are the things that we do because, again, it helps us not forget about the other children, but kind of all be together. The courage to be imperfect. This is so important to me. Perfect courage, the best courage of all, is the courage to be imperfect. I'm looking out here. There are a bunch of imperfect people out here. Not as imperfect as the people who left. You're better than that. But really, we are all imperfect. That's what it comes down to with this raising a child with charge syndrome. Yeah, I feel guilty because there are things we didn't do. Nancy, who's been feeling guilty ever since she heard Jeremy speak yesterday. Or was it Rob? Or was it Dave? It was Rob. Thanks, Rob. That we didn't do the right things when Jacob was born. You know, we didn't know what they were, but that's no excuse, right? We should have. So yes, I'm an imperfect person, but if I let that get me down, there's no way I can raise Jacob. I have to recognize my imperfections as just being human and having the courage to own these imperfections and move on and have my family. Getting along and contributing. Getting along is sometimes kind of thing for families, but over the lifespan, being able to get along with one another and feel like we're all contributing and making a difference is important. Maybe mothers telling the fathers when something they do really helped, be a good thing. And fathers maybe recognizing that mothers often experience an extra amount of guilt and helping them relieve that a bit could be a really good thing. How do we define ourselves? You know, we define ourselves often by our family, and we are special and unique and incredibly wonderful families in so many ways. I mean, I feel like if only I could speak German, I could connect better with all of you, but I feel this connection anyway. You know, you're all my best friends because we have this incredible bond together because other people don't know what we go through. We do, and we share that, and that's so, so incredibly important. I want to quickly go over the marathon skills. This is, other than a nice slide of pictures, my last slide, so hang in there with me. Anne Turnbull is the actually stepmother of a man with Down syndrome, but she helped to raise him. She's a professor of special education at University of Kansas in the United States. And she wrote this little article about the marathon skills, and I use it frequently because I like it so much. She said, raising a child with disabilities is not a sprint. If you try to run fast, you will not make it. Marathon runners need to pace themselves. They need to nourish themselves along the way. And we are running a marathon here, not a sprint. We can't get it all done at once. And there are many times you go to bed at night saying, I didn't do all the things I was supposed to do. And no, you didn't. And no one could. But it's a marathon. You will get to it. Just hang in there. So her skills for running the marathon: meet basic needs. If you are not taking care of yourself, you are of no use to your child. If you're not getting sleep, if you're not eating properly, if you're not having an opportunity to go do taekwondo, you are not meeting your basic needs. We all have other interests. If you can never do those, if you have to get rid of them because I have to suffer for my child, you will suffer and your child will suffer. We do need to take care of ourselves. And that's part of the support within the family of saying, yes, I know you need to do this thing for yourself. I'm going to support that for you. Just I need your backup whenever I can, right? So make sure that you don't ignore that. Know yourself and your family. Of course, I know myself and my family. Well, we really don't because we change constantly. So being in touch with how each family member is growing and developing, including ourselves, really, really important skill, because then we can be more responsive to each other's needs and how we can all function together to make this work. Love unconditionally. That is said all the time, but it's so much harder than it sounds. Because to love unconditionally means essentially being able to say, Jacob, if you never get any better, never learn to do anything more, and you're kind of like this the rest of your life, I'm happy with that. That's okay. That's just fine. But I don't feel that way all the time, right? Because I want something more for him. I also want something more for myself, right? It's hard to separate that out. So to really get to the point where you can say, yes, I love this child unconditionally, is hard, because at the same time, we have to fight like crazy to help our kid get better, to help our kid advance, to help get all the resources for our child so things can be different. So on one hand, we're saying, yes, things are fine as they are, but no, I'm going to work my tail off trying to make things better. It's really, really hard for us as parents to do that, but so important. Establish relationships. We can't just rely on one another in the family. We cannot be enmeshed. We have to go out there and find other supports and other people who can be important for us in our lives. Most communities, there are other families of children with disabilities. It doesn't have to be that. Sometimes there are actually families out there who get it and can be part of that broader support system for ourselves. But we really do need to have relationships and not go it alone. Experience the benefit from emotions. I don't know if they're going to use it, but when we got interviewed yesterday for this film for the conference, I choked up. I'm a little embarrassed, but I can't help it sometimes. This is too important to me. This is too meaningful to me. This is too much close where I live for me to constantly maintain my composure. And yet I'm wise enough, I think, to know that if I cry, that's okay. I need to. It shows how much I care and how important certain things are for me. So I think all the range of emotions, just not sad emotions, happy emotions too, those moments of great enthusiasm, those moments when you think, hey, everything's really, really wonderful today. Might not be tomorrow, but today things are good. I guess by people sometimes say, well, how are you? How's your family, Tim? And I say, at this moment, good, right? Because who knows? Take charge. For a number of years, Nancy and I waited for the case manager to come by and take charge. The case manager never showed up. It's us. we are in charge. We have to be in charge. There's no way to get out of being in charge. So we might as well accept that, because being in charge will help us win the race. And of course, in our case, taking charge is cool because it's charge. Yes. Anticipate the future. I know we worry about those things, what's going to happen in the future, what's going to happen to our kid in the future. Yeah, we're going to worry about it. But worrying about it leads to good things. You know, it's been mentioned that Jacob lives in his own home. Do you know that Jacob was in kindergarten when Nancy said at a meeting, someday Jacob will live in his own home? And I rolled my eyes, thinking this was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. Today, Jacob lives in his own home. It wouldn't have happened, though, without anticipating the future and making sure we're working towards that. And then finally, establish balance in your life. I always say when I get to this one, and when you figure out how to do that, please let me know. It's hard to balance everything in one's life. We are so busy, and we're especially busy given our circumstances with having a child with charge. But think about what balances things out for you. And if you find those things, embrace them, because we need to have not everything be one thing in our lives. It's not just charge. We are not just parents or siblings of children with charge. We are human beings and families. And all of it is important in terms of who we are. There are some families. Actually, that's ours right there. Yay. And yay. Three. Yeah, yay. You see what I mean? That's our motto. So, and if any of you want to be in those pictures, let me know. Thank you very much. Thank you for staying.
Vielen, vielen Dank.
So thank you very, very much. Some passionate and emotional words.
That too, emotional words. Vielen, vielen Dank für.
So thank you so much for staying, for having stayed until the end. It's been a wonderful conference that is now drawing to a close. 10 years have gone by, and I hope we'll meet again in 2 years, at the very latest, here in Oberwesel, or next year in Lauterbach. Have a safe trip home, stay safe and healthy, and we'll be staying in touch. Thank you so much for coming.